Yeah, hi. This is Mike Ginevro. Um, there are, for the most part, when we take classes, I speak also of my own classes, they're eminently forgettable. If we're lucky, we learn a few key facts. Um, if we're lucky, maybe we use the material later on in our life a few times. Most of what happens in classes, golly, on a day-to-day basis just becomes a blur. But sometimes teachers reach students in profound ways. Sometimes the lessons that lasted only a few moments becomes a defining experience for the students. And this is about one of those moments for me, reflecting on my freshman year at Stanford and the state of my life in 2003 when I wrote this. First, Memorial Court is a part of Stanford University, and I was in early 2003. I was riding my bike through Stanford a lot. It was I had left Hewlett-Packard, and my exercise was going out every morning and just riding during a difficult time in our family. And so what you're going to see at the beginning is directions on how to get to Memorial Park and the statues of the burghers of Calais from Rodin that were there at that time. So that's kind of the context. Bike to the front of Building 370, the Science and Technology and Society program at Stanford. Turn left into the quad, go to the front of Memorial Church, turn left across the quad, pass through the archway to Memorial Court, and enter the time warp of memory to the spring of 1967. Spring quarter at Stanford. Lord, I love the Stanford campus all year round, but especially during the golden twilight of Indian summer and during the blossom-filled green of spring. Spring quarter at Stanford, blossoms, the green-yellow of new growth, the return of the light after winter's darkness. When I was a freshman at Stanford in the spring of 1967, the make-or-break course was Western Civilization, Western Civ. If you survived Western Civ, you would probably be okay for the remainder of your undergraduate journey. If you didn't get through Western Civ, it was time for what the corporate world calls a career decision. As I passed through the archway to Memorial Court, my mind returns to the spring of 1967 and Western Civ. There on the lawn of Memorial Court on a light-filled spring day, the horror of the Holocaust became the topic of our conversation. We had just read a monograph on a petty bureaucrat in the Third Reich who became a functionary in the killing machine that was the Holocaust. Mr. H., Mr. Hymans, our instructor, commented on the bureaucrat. He was an ordinary man. He had a wife and children. In so many ways, he was just like us. And he became a cog in the Holocaust machinery. If the man in the monograph could become an instrument of the Holocaust, and if he was a person much like us, what does this ordinary person tell us about our own lives and about our own capacities? The thoughts and words rush from our minds and our lips. No, not us. No, we could not do that. No. But he was an ordinary man. We are ordinary people. Over the years, I returned often to Holocaust studies, Gavin Langmuir's class on medieval anti-Semitism at Stanford, the History 200 class of the mid-1960s, Viktor Frankl, Elie Wiesel, Anne Frank, Abraham Heschel. The list goes on and on. Yes, it was true that all too many people became instruments of evil in the Holocaust, but there was always a choice, however awful and ghastly that choice had to be. Yes, many ordinary people became cogs in the killing machine, but other ordinary people sheltered the victims, aided the victims in their flight, and when there was no escape, sacrificed themselves in service to their fellow victims. Today, 2003, 36 years after that spring day, reproductions of the Burghers of Calais by Rodin stand on the very spot where our Western civ class confronted the ultimate evil of the Holocaust. I remember the first time I saw the Burghers of Calais. During my 6 months at Stanford in Italy, our group had a field trip to Paris. There I encountered the Burghers of Calais for the first time. Size. They just seemed so huge to me, so much larger than life. Horror. In the midst of my own existential journey, they personified the horror of certain death. Courage and sacrifice. There are moments when we must confront the horrifying reality of life, moments when we must choose. The Burghers chose the path of courage and sacrifice to save their city, their community, their friends, their families. My eyes fall on the words on the plaque at the foot of the statues in Memorial Court in the spring of 2003. For Rodin, this episode was an opportunity to celebrate the idea that heroic deeds may be performed by ordinary people. Two images coexist in the same grassy space, separated in my memory's time by 36 springs. In all places and at all times, inhabitants of diametrically opposed ethical universes, the petty bureaucrat from the Third Reich and the Burghers from medieval Calais, ordinary people facing extraordinary decisions. I call on heaven and earth to record this day that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. From the book of Deuteronomy. Who chose life and blessing, who chose death and cursing. And what do these ordinary people tell us about our own lives? Thank you. There's a kind of coda to this as well. In my last year at adult education, I had the opportunity, unbelievable honor, to work with refugees from around the world. And one of the refugees was a young woman from Rwanda. And she had to have been about 12 during the genocide in Rwanda. And both of her parents were killed. She spent like 3 years in refugee camps in what I believe Cameroon. And she told me how she worked with the orphans and the children because they were the only and the elderly, the orphans and the elderly, because those were the only people who survived the genocide in Rwanda. Years later, one of the actors involved in the films on Rwanda wrote a book and talked about ordinary people there, and ordinary people who faced the same choices that the bureaucrat in Nazi Germany faced, that the Burghers of Calais faced. And they faced that same choice just a few years ago in our own world. Much food for thought. That's what education is supposed to do, make us think.